The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Silver Creek, Montana Territory, in 1876. But it wasn't the bullet that changed Ruby Pierce's life. Forever it was the letter she clutched in her trembling hands. Standing on the weathered porch of her father's mercantile, she read the final words from the man who had promised her the world, only to vanish like morning mist when she needed him most. Ruby folded the letter and pressed it against her abdomen, where beneath the loose folds of her dress, a secret grew with each passing day. At 22, she had believed Walter's promises of marriage and a home in San Francisco. Now, 6 months after he'd left town with her innocence and her heart, all she had was his hastily scrawled note explaining he'd married a banker's daughter in California. "Miss Pierce." A deep voice startled her. Ruby quickly straightened, adjusting her shawl to better conceal her condition. "Mr. Blackburn," she acknowledged, recognizing the tall cowboy who occasionally supplied horses to her father. Zachary Blackburn removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached hair and eyes the color of a summer storm. At 28, he had earned a reputation as one of the territory's finest horse trainers, though rumors about his past as a Union soldier during the war followed him like shadows. "Your father mentioned the supply wagon is late again." His gaze lingered on her face, and Ruby wondered if he could read the worry etched there. "Yes," she said, forcing a smile. "The spring rains washed out Miller's Pass. We expect them by week's end." Zachary nodded, and Ruby noticed the small scar that cut through his right eyebrow, a reminder of battles fought and survived. "I'll be heading to Helena tomorrow. I could bring back anything urgent you might need." "That's kind, but unnecessary." Ruby tucked a strand of copper hair behind her ear. "Father says we'll manage." The truth was they were barely managing. After her mother's death 2 years prior, Ruby had taken over running the household and helping with the store. Now, with her condition becoming increasingly difficult to hide, she knew her time in Silver Creek was limited. She had begun saving whatever meager coins she could, planning her escape before the scandal destroyed her family's reputation. "Well, the offer stands," Zachary said, replacing his hat. "Good day, Miss Pierce." Ruby watched him walk away, his long stride carrying him toward the livery stable. She had always found Zachary Blackburn intriguing not because of his handsome features, though they were certainly noteworthy, but because of the quiet dignity he carried like a shield. Unlike most men in town, he never engaged in idle gossip or drunken revelry. He simply went about his business, spoke when necessary, and retreated to his small ranch outside town. As the weeks passed, Ruby's secret became increasingly difficult to conceal. She had taken to wearing her deceased mother's dresses, altered to accommodate her changing figure. She avoided town as much as possible, claiming headaches or fatigue when her father questioned her absence from the store. One evening, as summer heat descended on Silver Creek, Ruby's father, Harold Pierce, sat her down after dinner. "Ruby, I'm worried about you," he said, his weathered face lined with concern. "You've been withdrawn sickly. Is there something you're not telling me?" Ruby's heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm fine, father, just tired from the heat." Harold studied her with eyes that had seen too much loss not to recognize it approaching again. "You remind me so much of your mother. She too tried to shield me from difficult truths." Tears threatened, but Ruby blinked them back. "I just need time," she whispered. "Whatever troubles you, we will face it together," he promised, patting her hand. That night, Ruby made her decision. She would leave before the month's end, before her condition became impossible to hide. She had a cousin in Denver who might take her in, at least until the baby arrived. After that, she would have to find work somewhere, somehow. 2 days later, disaster struck. Harold Pierce collapsed while unloading supplies. The doctor diagnosed a severe heart ailment and prescribed complete rest. Ruby found herself not only hiding her pregnancy, but also running the mercantile single-handedly. On a particularly busy afternoon, Ruby struggled to reach a bolt of fabric on a high shelf. The stepladder wobbled beneath her, and she felt herself falling backward until strong hands steadied her. "Careful there, Miss Pierce." Zachary Blackburn guided her safely to the ground, his expression betraying concern rather than judgment when her shawl slipped, momentarily revealing the curve of her belly. Ruby quickly adjusted her clothing, heat flooding her cheeks. "Thank you, Mr. Blackburn. I should have been more careful." Instead of leaving after purchasing his supplies, Zachary lingered. "How is your father recovering?" Slowly, Ruby admitted. "The doctor says his heart needs time to heal." Zachary nodded, then asked hesitantly, "And you, are you managing all right?" The genuine concern in his voice nearly undid her. For months, Ruby had carried her burden alone, constructing walls around her secret and her shame. Now, with a simple question, this quiet cowboy had found a crack in her defenses. "I'm managing," she said, the words catching in her throat. Zachary studied her for a moment. "My sister once found herself in a similar situation. If you ever need assistance, my ranch is just past Cottonwood Creek." Before Ruby could respond, he tipped his hat and departed, leaving her stunned by his perceptiveness and his discretion. That evening, as Ruby closed the store, she spotted Mabel Harris and Josephine Klein, the town's most notorious gossips, huddled outside the dressmaker's shop. Their gazes followed her, and their whispers carried on the evening breeze. "Poor Harold doesn't even know what shame his daughters brought upon him. Always thought she carried herself too proudly. Wonder who the father is." Ruby hurried home, tears blurring her vision. Her worst fear was coming true. Her secret was becoming public knowledge. By morning, everyone in Silver Creek would know her disgrace. At home, she found her father asleep in his chair, a Bible open on his lap. How could she tell him? How could she bring this scandal upon a man already weakened by illness? Ruby packed a small valise that night, a few clothes, her mother's locket, and the pitiful sum she had managed to save. She wrote a note explaining she needed time away, asking for forgiveness without revealing the complete truth. As dawn broke, she slipped from the house, leaving the only home she had ever known. The stagecoach wouldn't arrive until noon, so Ruby sought refuge in the small church at the edge of town. The building was empty this early, offering a quiet place to gather her thoughts and pray for guidance. "Running away rarely solves problems, Miss Pierce." Ruby whirled around to find Zachary Blackburn standing in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning light. "How did you know I'd be here?" she asked, clutching her valise. "I saw you leave your house." "Thought you might be headed for the stage." He stepped inside, keeping a respectful distance. "Where will you go?" "Denver," Ruby replied, seeing no point in lying. "My cousin lives there." "And your father, you're just going to leave him alone, ill?" Ruby's composure cracked. "What choice do I have? The whole town knows my shame by now. I can't subject him to that scandal." "Scandal fades," Zachary said quietly. "Abandonment lasts forever. You don't understand. I understand more than you might think." He moved closer, his expression solemn. "My sister died trying to escape her situation. Fell from a train platform in Chicago, she and her unborn child." Ruby's hand instinctively moved to her belly. "I'm sorry for your loss, but my decision is made." "Then let me offer an alternative." Zachary removed his hat, holding it against his chest in a gesture that seemed almost formal. "Marry me." Ruby stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What, marry me?" he repeated. "Your child would have a name, a home. Your father would have care in his illness, and you—" He paused. "You would have protection. You can't be serious. You barely know me." "I know enough," Zachary said. "You're kind to everyone who enters your store. You've been caring for your father without complaint. You read books when you think no one is watching." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "And you never water down the whiskey like some shopkeepers." Despite everything, Ruby found herself laughing. "Those are hardly reasons to propose marriage. Perhaps not." His expression grew serious again. "But I have a good ranch, a steady income. I can provide for you and the child. And I promise to treat you with respect." "Why would you do this?" Ruby whispered. "Because sometimes people deserve a second chance." Zachary's eyes held memories of pain that matched her own. "I've made my share of mistakes, Miss Pierce. I've seen too much death, too much suffering. Maybe this is my chance to bring some good into the world instead." Ruby studied him, this man offering salvation when she least expected it. "It wouldn't be a real marriage," she said finally. "It would be whatever we decide to make it," he replied. "But it would be legal and binding in the eyes of the town and the law. And the child would be raised as mine." His voice carried absolute certainty. No one would ever know different. Ruby closed her eyes, weighing her limited options. A loveless marriage of convenience versus an uncertain future alone. I need time to think. The stage leaves at noon, Zachary reminded her. I'll be at the church until then if you decide to stay. He left her alone with her thoughts, the morning sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the worn wooden pews. An hour later, Ruby walked slowly back to her home. Her father was awake, panic in his eyes when he saw her valise. Ruby. Where have you been? What's happening? She took a deep breath and told him everything about Walter, about the baby, about her plan to flee to Denver. As the words poured out, she waited for the disappointment, the anger, the rejection. Instead, Harold Pierce pulled his daughter into his arms and wept. My poor girl, why didn't you tell me? Did you think I would turn you away? I was afraid, Ruby admitted. Afraid of disappointing you, of bringing shame to our family. Family stands together through all storms, he said firmly. We would have found a way. Ruby hesitated, then shared Zachary's unexpected proposal. Her father listened thoughtfully. Blackburn is a good man, he said finally. Honest in his dealings, respected despite being something of a loner. But marriage is a serious commitment, Ruby. Do you have feelings for him? I hardly know him, she confessed, but he offered me us a chance when no one else would, Harold sighed. In my day, most marriages began with less. Love can grow from respect and kindness. He squeezed her hand. Whatever you decide, I am with you. By 11 o'clock, Ruby had made her decision. She found Zachary still at the church, sitting quietly in a pew, his hat beside him. If your offer still stands, she said from the doorway, I accept. Zachary stood, a mixture of relief and determination crossing his face. It stands. They were married that afternoon by the town's pastor, with only Harold Pierce and the livery stable owner as witnesses. Ruby wore her best dress, hastily altered that morning to better conceal her condition, though the whispers around town suggested the effort was futile. As they left the church, Ruby noticed the stairs, heard the hushed conversations that ceased as they passed. She kept her eyes lowered, shame burning her cheeks despite the gold band now encircling her finger. Zachary must have sensed her distress. In a gesture that surprised her, he took her hand, interlacing their fingers. Let them stare, he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. I'll shield you from their judgment. You're my wife now. The words, spoken with such conviction, gave Ruby the courage to lift her chin and walk proudly beside him. That evening, Zachary brought Ruby to his ranch, a modest but well-maintained property with a sturdy two-bedroom house, a barn, and corrals filled with horses in various stages of training. A middle-aged Mexican woman named Alina greeted them, her expression betraying no surprise at Zachary's sudden marriage. Alina has been keeping my house since I settled here, Zachary explained. She lives in the small cottage behind the orchard with her husband Miguel, who helps with the ranch. Alina showed Ruby to the master bedroom, which had been hastily prepared with fresh linens and wildflowers in a simple vase. Senor Zachary is a good man, she said as she helped Ruby unpack her few belongings. Quiet but kind, you will be happy here. Later, as they shared a simple supper Alina had prepared, Zachary outlined his proposal more fully. You'll have your own room until after the baby comes, he said. I'll take the spare room. The town will assume what they will, but under this roof you'll have your privacy. And after the baby. Ruby asked, uncertain what he expected of this arrangement. Zachary considered his words carefully. After the baby, we can decide how to proceed. If you wish to maintain separate rooms, I will respect that. If you eventually want to make this a true marriage in all ways, that door remains open. He met her gaze directly. I won't press you, Ruby. This is your choice always. The use of her given name sent an unexpected warmth through her. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. The following weeks brought adjustments for both of them. Ruby learned the rhythms of ranch life, helping Alina with household management and even assisting with the horse's care when her condition allowed. Zachary proved to be a considerate, if reserved, husband, ensuring her comfort, bringing her father to visit regularly, and never once mentioning the circumstances that had brought them together. As her pregnancy advanced, Ruby found herself watching Zachary when he thought she wasn't looking. She observed the gentle way he handled even the most spirited horses, the respect he showed Alina and Miguel, and the quiet competence with which he managed his business. She began to appreciate his dry humor, revealed in rare moments when his guard lowered, and the unexpected tenderness in his eyes when he asked about her health. One evening, as summer gave way to fall, Ruby sat on the porch, enjoying the cooler air. Zachary joined her, offering a shawl against the evening chill. "Thank you," she said, wrapping it around her shoulders, "for this and for everything else." He settled into the chair beside her. "You don't need to keep thanking me, Ruby. You've brought order to this house, made it a home. If anyone should be grateful, it's me." Ruby studied his profile in the fading light. "Why did you really offer to marry me, Zachary? The truth." He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke. "When I returned from the war, I was broken. Not just in body, though there were injuries, but in spirit. I'd seen too much death cause too much of it." His voice was low, measured. "I came west to escape those memories, but they followed me. For years, I've just been existing, not living." He turned to look at her. "Then I saw you in that church, ready to run, ready to face the world alone with your child, and something woke in me. A chance to protect rather than destroy, to build something instead of tearing it down." A rueful smile touched his lips. "It's selfish, really. I needed salvation as much as you did." Ruby reached across the space between them and took his hand. "Then perhaps we saved each other." As autumn progressed, Ruby's father's health improved enough that he could manage the store with hired help. The town's gossip about Ruby's hasty marriage gradually subsided, replaced by speculation about Zachary Blackburn's unexpected transformation from solitary rancher to attentive husband. Indeed, Zachary had become protective of Ruby in ways that surprised them both. He accompanied her to town for medical appointments, standing tall beside her while whispers followed them through the streets. "Let them stare," became his constant refrain, spoken with such conviction that Ruby began to believe it herself. At home, he worked tirelessly to prepare for the baby's arrival, constructing a cradle from pine boards and commissioning a rocking chair from the town's carpenter. When Ruby discovered him late one night sanding the cradle's edges to silken smoothness, her heart swelled with an emotion she wasn't ready to name. "You'll be a good father," she said from the doorway. Zachary looked up, momentarily startled. "I hope so. Never had much of an example myself." Ruby entered the room, her hand resting on her prominent belly. "Neither did I for motherhood. My mother died when I was young." "We'll learn together then," he said, and the simple statement felt like a promise more binding than their marriage vows had been. As winter settled over Montana territory, bringing snow and bitter winds, Ruby's time drew near. Her father moved temporarily into their spare room, his protective instincts aroused by his daughter's condition and the increasing isolation caused by winter storms. One night, as a blizzard howled outside, Ruby's labor began. Alina, experienced from delivering many babies in her Mexican village, took charge, sending Zachary and Harold to boil water and prepare clean linens. The labor was long and difficult. Through hours of pain, Ruby clung to Zachary's hand, drawing strength from his steady presence. Near dawn, when her strength was failing, he leaned close to her ear. "You can do this, Ruby," he whispered fiercely. "You're the strongest person I've ever known." With a final, exhausting effort, Ruby brought their daughter into the world, a tiny, perfect girl with a shock of dark hair and eyes that, when they eventually opened, revealed the same storm gray as Zachary's. "She's beautiful," Zachary said, his voice thick with emotion as Alina placed the swaddled infant in Ruby's arms. "Just like her mother." Ruby looked up at him, seeing tears in his eyes that matched her own. "Would you like to hold your daughter?" The way Zachary cradled the infant, with a mixture of awe and tenderness, cemented something in Ruby's heart. This man, who had married her out of duty and compassion, was looking at her child, another man's child, with pure, unconditional love. They named her Grace Alina Blackburn, and from her earliest days, it was clear she had Zachary wrapped around her tiny finger. He would walk the floor with her for hours when she was colicky, sing soft lullabies in a surprisingly melodious voice, and proudly show her off to everyone who visited the ranch. As spring arrived, bringing new life to the landscape, Ruby found herself watching her husband with their daughter and recognizing the undeniable truth she had fallen in love with Zachary Blackburn. Not out of gratitude or necessity, but because of the man he had revealed himself to be day by quiet day. Yet their marriage remained unconsummated, with Zachary honoring his promise to give her time and space. They had settled into a comfortable partnership, sharing meals, conversation, and the care of Grace, but maintaining separate bedrooms and a careful physical distance. One evening, as they sat before the fire after Grace had been put to bed, Ruby gathered her courage. "Zachary, are you happy with our arrangement?" He looked up from the bridle he was mending. "What do you mean, our marriage?" Ruby clarified. "We live as friends, as partners in raising Grace, but not as," she faltered. "Not as husband and wife," he finished for her. Setting aside his work, he met her gaze directly. "I made you a promise, Ruby. I won't press you for more than you're willing to give. And if I want more," the words were barely audible over the crackling fire. Zachary went very still. "What are you saying?" Ruby rose from her chair and crossed to kneel beside him. "I'm saying that I've grown to care for you, Zachary, more than I thought possible when we made this arrangement." His hand, calloused from years of ranch work, gently cupped her cheek. "I've loved you since before Grace was born," he admitted, "but I never wanted you to feel obligated." "Not obligation," Ruby whispered. "Choice, my choice." Their first kiss was tentative, a gentle exploration that quickly deepened into something more urgent, more honest than either had allowed themselves to express. That night, Ruby moved her belongings into their shared bedroom, and their marriage truly began. What had started as an arrangement of convenience transformed into a deep and abiding love, built on respect, shared experiences, and the family they were creating together. As Grace grew from infant to toddler, the Blackburn Ranch prospered. Zachary's reputation as a horse trainer brought buyers from as far as Denver and San Francisco. Ruby, drawing on her experience in her father's store, began keeping the ranch's books and eventually started breeding and selling the beautiful wildflowers that grew in abundance on their land. Harold Pierce, fully recovered, continued running the mercantile but spent every Sunday with his daughter and granddaughter, marveling at the family that had formed from what once seemed like disaster. In the summer of 1878, just after Grace's first birthday, Ruby discovered she was expecting again. When she shared the news with Zachary, his joy was boundless. "Another child," he said, holding her close. "Our child." Ruby looked up at him, love overflowing. "They're both our children, Zachary. Grace has never known any father but you." Later that evening, as they watched Grace taking her first unsteady steps across the porch, Zachary slipped his arm around Ruby's waist. "Remember when we first married, how people stared and whispered?" Ruby nodded. "And you said, 'Let them stare.'" They finished together, smiling at the memory. "I was terrified then," Ruby admitted, certain I'd made a terrible mistake. "And now?" Zachary asked, his eyes reflecting the sunset's golden light. Ruby leaned against his shoulder, watching their daughter discover the world one wobbly step at a time. "Now I know it was the best decision I ever made." In February 1879, Ruby gave birth to a son they named James Harold Blackburn. As the family gathered around the newest addition, Grace toddled to her father's side, arms raised in a silent request. Zachary lifted her up to see her baby brother, supporting her with the same steady strength that had become the foundation of their life together. "Family," Grace said, one of her few clear words, patting her father's cheek. "That's right, sweetheart," Zachary agreed, looking from his daughter to his son, and finally to Ruby, his gaze filled with a contentment that once seemed impossible. "We're a family." As spring returned to Montana territory, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings, the Blackburn Ranch stood as testament to the power of second chances. What had begun in secrecy and shame had blossomed into a love story written not in grand gestures or passionate declarations, but in daily acts of kindness, protection, and unwavering commitment. Ruby, once so careful to hide her swelling belly from a judgmental world, now stood proudly beside the man who had promised to shield her, and had kept that promise in ways neither could have imagined on that fateful day in Silver Creek's little church. Their story, like the wildflowers that bloomed across their land each spring, had grown from unlikely soil into something beautiful and enduring, a reminder that love, in its truest form, doesn't merely accept what is, but nurtures what could be.